Prime Minister Anthony Albanese promises to get closer to Indonesia and calls on Australia's massive superannuation funds to invest in the Asian nation. ANZ boss Shayne Elliott suggests that some people may never return to the office, and Elvis-mania takes off. It's Tuesday, the 7th of June, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Shayne Elliott.
Good morning, Michael.
How is sunny Orange this week? Shayne, I know you're in the New South Wales Central West visiting your mother.
I am. Not so sunny, very cold, snowing on the way up here, and it looks like it could snow today as well. Freezing.
Oh, but that's the thing, isn't it? That if it's going to be that cold, you want a bit of a reward for kind of tolerating the temperature, and snow is that reward. You want to see that.
And it's great to see the snowfields opening. So in Victoria and New South Wales, they're letting some runs go. And this is one of the earliest seasons they've had for a long while. And given what a horrendous couple of seasons we've had because of COVID and weather, let's hope that the Snowies do a great season this time around.
It does actually look like it's going to be a really good season, and I'm particularly excited about that because I have a trip booked in.
You do, in August. You're off, aren't you?
That's right. I've booked in my leave, as long as that's okay with you, Mr. Aylmer. I'm hoping it is. I haven't received the formal approval of it yet, so I may just be disappearing on you for a week. But anyway, we can discuss that off air. Shayne, there's a fair bit to actually talk about today, and you've got a chat after the show, which is a good one with the guest that we've spoken to a couple of times before. It's Jason Cooper, the CEO of EnviroSuite.
That's right. Jason is an expert in his field. And we talk about EnviroSuite, the company itself. It's a very interesting, it's a data company, basically creates or measures and creates data around pollution and particularly noise pollution. It's doing things with NASA, some really interesting stuff. But we become a bit more general and talk about the idea of greenwashing. And it's such an important part of the investment decision now is the whole ESG basis of an investment, but just how real is ESG? And that's kind of what we get into with Jason. Great chat.
Yeah, it certainly is. But the main story this morning, Shayne, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese wants Australian super funds to consider investing in Indonesia as part of his push to deepen ties between Australia and our most populous neighbour.
Yes, Mr. Albanese said his current visit to Indonesia, complete with a bike ride alongside Indonesian leader Joko Widodo, is the beginning of a sustained campaign to seize opportunities in the country. He also launched a $200 million partnership on climate and infrastructure projects and said the CEOs with him in Jakarta, and that includes the bosses of Wesfarmers, Commonwealth Bank and Telstra, will be at the vanguard of greater collaboration. In his first bilateral visit since becoming Prime Minister, Mr. Albanese said revitalising the two countries' trade and investment relationship is a priority for his government, and Australia will also assist to help design and construct Indonesia's new capital, which is being relocated from Jakarta.
Shayne, Indonesia's it's right on our doorstep, isn't it? And it's such a massive potential market for Australia.
Yes, more than 270 million people live on our doorstep. It's a country that's industrialising, and while we export some things, services mostly, like education, there's a potential to export much more, like commodities. The two countries signed a comprehensive economic partnership agreement back in March 2019. It came into force a year later, but then COVID hit and it's really prevented much else from going on. Indonesia is not a top 10 trading partner for Australia, which is somewhat surprising given how close it is and how many people are in that country, but it certainly is one of the fastest growing economies in the region, even in the world. Australia, I think it's fair to say, has not always been sensitive to cultural differences, and that's hampered our relationship at times. Yesterday, Mr. Albanese said his government would hold regular meetings with Indonesian officials. He also told President Widodo that he'd attend the G20 summit in Jakarta later in the year. The two certainly seem to get on, and Indonesia rolled out the red carpet with an official car with Australia on its number plate, marching bands, soldiers on horsebacks, and, of course, that bike ride. You know, it's just, I think it's great. I mean, the bike is such a central part of Indonesia, but blokes in suits on bike, I suppose it's better than blokes in lycra on bikes.
Marginally, yes. But as soon as you mentioned it, I had to look it up, and I've just been having a bit of a look at the pictures of the bike ride, because when you first mentioned it, I had an image of the two of them on a tandem bike, one behind the other, and I was almost a little bit disappointed to see that it was two mountain bikes kind of riding side by side. So I kind of preferred my idea of it.
Did they tuck their trousers in their socks?
Let me zoom in on the picture. They might have actually. I think they might well have done.
Yeah, because that was always a fail when you were young and riding a bike and you had jeans on or pants on. You just got caught in the chain.
Yeah, flapping around, and all of a sudden it catches in there, and then you got grease on the hem of your pants, and then you get in trouble. And
disaster.
God, what have you done to this podcast, Sean? You've just kind of taken it down a very, very strange route. Let's move on. The local market, how did it perform yesterday?
It was a funny day, Michael. It tumbled initially after a poor lead-in from Wall Street over the weekend. Then it clambered higher, then dove again at the end of trading, and then right in the final few minutes, it took off again. It was a true rollercoaster ride. By the end of the day, it was down 0.45% to 7,206 points. Technology stocks were sold off, while telcos, industrials, and materials all did poorly. Energy companies outperformed, and not surprising because the price of oil and gas rose. Among the large caps, BHP fell more than 1%, while CSL jumped by about the same amount. The banks were generally lower. Woodside Energy was the best of the large caps, up 3.3%, while Santos jumped 1.6%. Tabcorp was the best on the day, up 5%. More of that in a moment. And Magellan Financial was the worst, falling another 3.5%.
There was a quarterly reweighting of the S&P 200 announced yesterday too, Sean.
That's right, and that makes a big difference to some of the smaller companies. So Appen, Codan, Polynovo, Platinum Asset Management and Tyro Payments were all dropped from the 200. Now, given index funds hug benchmark indices, an index fund of the top 200 will now drop those companies. So it's not surprising that most of them underperformed yesterday. It was good news, though, for the companies that come into the top 200, BrainChip Holdings, Core Lithium, Lake Resources and New Hope Corporation. Now, Michael, I'm sure you're going to ask me, BrainChip. What it does, it provides neural computing technology solutions in Australia and the US. No, I don't know either. No idea.
No, but I do like the fact that, hey, if it does neural computing, BrainChip, that's one of those companies that's pretty close to kind of describing what its function is in its name. So it gets a tick on its name from me.
It's my homework. I'm going to find out by the weekend exactly what it does. Look, just before we leave the local markets, the Reserve Bank Board, of course, meets today, and a poll of economists in the Financial Review shows that the dismal scientists agree the rate hike today will be between 25 and 40 basis points.
And what's happening on international markets?
Well, oil is dominating many of the headlines. Oil prices rose further yesterday with Brent crude above $120 a barrel after Saudi Arabia raised the official selling price for its flagship crude to Asia and Europe. That came despite last week's decision by OPEC Plus to increase output over the next couple of months. The Aussie dollar has plenty of friends. Investment bank UBS is the latest to come out in support of the currency, predicting it will hit 76 US cents by the end of the year and 78 cents into next year. A big part of it is commodity prices, from iron ore and copper through to wheat. But there's also a sense that the local economy could expand at a more rapid clip than the US economy, and that will support the currency. It's currently trading around 72 US cents.
All right, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, the number of job ads rose slightly last month, close to their record levels, which means that pressure will continue on wages.
That's right. The ANZ job ad series rose by 0.4% in May to 238,000 positions available. What it shows is that there's plenty of unmet demand for labour. There's plenty of jobs out there. Unlike the United Kingdom and the United States, there are, though, still fewer job vacancies in Australia than unemployed people, and that's actually a good thing. But with an unemployment rate of 3.9% and still limited migration, pressure will come on employers to boost wages to attract staff. That, of course, feeds into inflation and higher interest rates.
Now, Sean, I'm intrigued by this one. Tabcorp will pay Racing Queensland $150 million to settle litigation, but it's good news for the company.
Well, yes, I suppose I should have been more precise there. The litigation payment isn't good news, but yesterday was a good day for Tabcorp and its share price jumped 5%, best on the bourse. Now, back in 2019, Racing Queensland commenced legal proceedings against Tabcorp in relation to disputes concerning the calculations of fees payable by Tabcorp. That's sorted. That's the good news. Now, according to Tabcorp, is that from December, Queensland will lift its point of consumption tax from 15 to 20%. So it's changing the tax rate. You'd think that'd be bad, but the updated tax will void Tabcorp's monetary agreements with Racing Queensland. Those agreements have placed Tabcorp at a disadvantage. In fact, Tabcorp claims that in Queensland, it will now pay the same amount of tax as its online rivals Sportsbet and Ladbrokes, which is about 35% of revenue, down from the current level of 44.5%. That has always been Tabcorp's big argument across the country. It pays more tax. The group is now lobbying for similar changes in New South Wales and Victoria, which of course are much bigger markets. All in all, it had to pay $150 million to settle litigation, but it got a great tax break in Queensland.
Okay, now Beijing has accused Australia of hyping an incident between an RAAF aircraft and a Chinese fighter jet over the South China Sea 2 weeks ago.
Yes, Australia lodged a protest with Beijing over the weekend after a J-16 fighter flew alongside and then cut across a maritime surveillance plane of Australia's. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the intercept was dangerous and posed a safety threat, while Beijing didn't respond publicly. An editorial in the Global Times newspaper yesterday says the accusations are groundless and asks why Australia comes out loud and urgent, but with little evidence.
Shayne, you mentioned Magellan Financial Group earlier, and their woes continue. The share price of Magellan tumbled 13% yesterday after the group said it had again lost funds under management.
Fewer stocks have fallen harder than Magellan. Its share price is 1/4 of what it was in the middle of last year, thanks to poor performance, a loss of investment mandates, and the decision by high-profile CEO Hamish Douglas to step down. Yesterday, it lost its spot in the ASX 100. Its funds under management at the end of April was $65 billion. Now, late last year, it was about $116 billion. That's a big fall. It isn't easy to turn around momentum in a funds management business unless the managers can seriously outperform. But to do that brings on all sorts of new risks. Tough times for Magellan.
Yeah, sure is. Now, Shayne, this is an interesting one. The Victorian government is pushing people to buy newer cars and trade in vehicles that are more than 10 years old.
That's right. New data shows 2/3 of drivers and passengers killed on Victorian roads last year were travelling in vehicles aged more than 10 years, according to the state's Transport Accident Commission. The average vehicle on Victoria's roads is around 10 years old. Roads Minister Ben Carroll said the state government was pushing to reduce this average age as part of its strategy to halve road deaths and significantly reduce serious injuries by 2030. What I found interesting was that he then went through some of the specifications that people should look at when buying a car. So drivers should look at auto emergency braking, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, electronic stability control, and front, side and curtain airbags.
Isn't that interesting? 10 years is only 2012. So that's kind of everything older than 2012. That's a lot of vehicles.
And what it makes me think is just how much better vehicles are over the past decade, if that's the case.
Absolutely. I tell you what, my 1989 Toyota Celica that I used to drive around, I reckon it had one airbag, and I reckon that probably didn't actually work. So
yeah, probably not.
I'm much more grateful now for a nice, safe car with all of those features. So I think this makes a lot of sense. Now, Shayne, we've spoken a fair bit about the return to the office and the fact that it's really only happening at this stage to a fairly limited extent. ANZ boss Shayne Elliott yesterday said that he thought return to the office had peaked.
Yes. In fact, 1 in 5 of ANZ's 28,000 staff haven't been back into the office since March. Now, separate data from the Property Council of Australia shows that while office occupancy across capital cities ranges from about 36% in Melbourne, that's the lowest, to about 51% in Brisbane, on Fridays and Mondays, it's closer or even below 20%. Mr. Elliott has reason to wonder if people will ever come back 5 days a week. The Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry canvassed small, medium and large businesses across a range of sectors in Melbourne CBD. It found that only 19% of employees are working in the office 5 days a week. 14% have not returned since restrictions were lifted. The large majority of businesses don't expect people will ever return to the office full-time.
Shayne, the competition regulator has delayed a decision on the proposed $2.9 billion buyout of superannuation administrator and share registry company Link Group.
That's right. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has pushed back its decision about whether it will allow Canadian group Dye & Durham to purchase the business. It won't make that call until the middle of next month. There's no indication that it will alter the outcome, but investors do not like delays like this one.
And Regional Express is facing strikes from pilots after failing to agree with unions on pay negotiations last week.
The Australian Federal of Air Pilots have lodged an application to conduct protected industrial action. The union claims Rex is offering a real wage cut of about 5% compared to 2018.
Okay, moving on to overseas news. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces a no confidence vote after a memo circulated among Conservative MPs listed no less than 13 reasons to drop Mr Johnson.
Yes, and it concluded that the only way to restore Conservative fortunes to a point where the party can win the next general election is to remove Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. It's been a long weekend in the UK and the phones certainly have been running hot. One of the final straws, apparently, was that Mr Johnson was booed over the weekend when he turned up for a Thanksgiving service for the Queen. That's not something that Conservative Prime Ministers are supposed to experience. While the rebels might force a vote, it's unlikely they'll have the numbers to actually remove Mr Johnson as Prime Minister.
Seems a very Australian thing to do, isn't it, to boo a Prime Minister at any kind of public function?
It doesn't sound very British, does it?
It really doesn't, no. So you can imagine the shock and the clutching at pearls that would have happened when that took place. So I can see why this is a story. And finally, Sean, I'm going to make a bit of an assumption here. You're a bit of an Elvis fan, aren't you?
Oh, look, I'm not. I wish you hadn't asked me that because I should have lied. I should have lied.
Oh, that's okay.
Are you?
No, I don't mind Elvis.
Yes, I'm the same.
Yeah, I certainly won't turn off an Elvis song if it comes on.
Yeah, there's certain songs he sings better than anyone else has ever done. But, I just don't get the whole dressing up sideburn thing.
So when I say that Elvis-mania is growing, it's probably not growing in the Aylmer household. but more broadly, outside the Aylmer household, Elvis-mania is certainly kind of picking up because there's a new movie coming out. It is called Elvis. It's due for release on June 24. And it seems that people are cashing in, which is obviously why it's kind of rating a mention in Fear and Greed.
That's exactly right. Apparently the film got a 12-minute standing ovation at Cannes and the Elvis business is absolutely booming. Las Vegas chapels are going great guns, according to media reports. In fact, mostly they receive cease and desist orders, as in stop impersonating Elvis, but that's even stopped at the moment. Travel sites are ramping up deals to visit Graceland in Memphis, including behind-the-scenes tours and rides in vintage Cadillacs. But my favourite, Michael, is a Swiss-made Ebel wristwatch, which includes a 14-carat yellow gold jagged wristband. Once, worn by Elvis before he gave it away to a backing band member. According to Bloomberg, it's up for sale for $495,000.
Wow. And he gave it away to a backing band member.
I don't know whether the backing band member is now selling it or whether it's passed through other hands. I'm not sure.
No, that's a great story though. All right, up next, Sean, is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. You mentioned it earlier. Jason Cooper, the CEO of EnviroSuite.
That's right. And as we said, we talk all about greenwashing and, whether companies are actually doing the right thing when it comes to ESG matters. We also talk about EnviroSuite itself, which is a really fascinating company.
All right, that's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Tuesday, the 7th of June, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.